listeners, welcome to the Jctr Corner, a program brought to you by the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection in conjunction with Loyola TV. Today we want to look at Zambia's public debt. What are the concerns and how could we as a nation address this situation? In the studio, I'm joined by Dr. Charity Msamba, who is a researcher as well as an academician. Dr. Msamba, welcome to the program. I'm happy to have you around today.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone watching the program.
Okay, Doc, I know that we have this hot topic at hand. You know, debt has affected a lot of people in this country. Maybe before we go to the topic of discussion, would you like to introduce yourself a bit? Who are you exactly? What do you do? Who is Charity in short?
Okay, my full name is Charity Msamba. I'm a Zambian. Currently, I am lecturing at the University of Zambia. I lecture international political economy, and I supervise research at master's program level. I'm also an activist in governance issues ranging from gender, human rights, economic and social justice. I'm a very interested person in people empowerment and local community development. I'm Catholic by faith.
Okay.
And apart from that, I love social life as well. I love music, art. I love to learn about different cultures. I like traveling, and I love cleaning. That's all.
That's quite a power-packed kind of a person and their hobby. Okay, let's go down to the topic of discussion. I know that debt has been looming the country for over some time now, and I know that the debt levels are quite high in our nation. Would you say that with this steady increasing of debt in Zambia, how sustainable is it?
Okay, first and foremost, our debts have been increasing not even at a steady pace. They have increased at a very fast pace. They have outpaced the growth in the economy. Debt has grown at a faster rate than our ability to generate resources. It has also grown faster than we've been able to put aside some savings. So we should always remember that, in fact, our debts are called unsustainable largely because they've grown very fast and to a huge level within a very short time. So beating the other fundamentals such as ability to pay back or ability to even put aside some national savings in order for us to address our own development needs. So our debts are in a severe, unsustainable situation.
Okay, Doc, would you say then that this particular debt that we have as a nation is somewhat careless on our part? How then are we accumulating so much debt when we know that we can't even sustain it at the end of the day?
Okay, there are various reasons that have led to this outcome. Some reasons are domestic, meaning they can be associated to ourselves, and some reasons are external. If you remember very well, by the year 2008, our debt stock had been reduced to a mere $2.5 billion from $7.5 billion. And we had received this huge debt relief under the initiatives called HIPIC 1 and HIPIC 2 and the Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative. So by 2008, we were sitting at a comfortable position in terms of debt. But today, we're classified as one of the highest indebted countries. Again, facing a very similar, but this time more dangerous situation of indebtedness. Where and why have we come from? Number one, the main factors that have contributed to this debt problem could be associated with the way we borrowed post the debt relief. For instance, we borrowed heavily within a short time, and we borrowed at commercial rates, meaning that we're borrowing not soft loans, but we borrowed hard loans. You've heard of the Eurobonds. Then we also started borrowing from commercial sources, meaning that we're not talking about grants or soft loans. So hard loans on the international market. These are very expensive loans. So this has contributed to worsening our debt situation, because when you borrow commercial loans and when you borrow from private, especially private lenders, you are simply dealing with loans that do not have a concessional aspect, meaning that you have to deal with the market issues. We are talking about commercial loans. Why did we borrow like that? Number one, there was a felt need by some of our leaders that we needed to access a huge amount of resources in order to address the huge problems that were experienced in Zambia by the year 2012, 2011. But here is the problem. We decided to go and borrow without doing our homework in-house. Number one, we didn't have a good plan on repayment. So the repayment strategy to accompany this fast-track borrowing was not in place. Secondly, we continued borrowing without addressing the problems that led us to the first debt problem in the 1990s. That is, we do not have very strong mechanisms to ensure that our borrowing systems in this country are guided by participatory, transparent, and accountable systems. Instead, most of the loans are contracted in such a manner that you and me are not even aware. The third reason why we found ourselves in this problem in terms of our own responsibility, domestic reason, is that at political level, we still do not have politics that talk to development. So the borrowing was took place in a context where we did not relate the borrowing to the real development needs of the people. I'll give you an example. We have borrowed 3 Eurobonds, big ones. The first 2 Eurobonds were accompanied by an implementation plan, utility plan for those loans. The last biggest Eurobond had no plan. So explain to the people how it was utilized. How do you borrow money but not have an utility or implementation plan? So all these things are leading to problems. Covering it all, we have very weak public finance systems. So every year you hear of huge resources of money being unaccounted for, being misapplied, misappropriated, whichever technical language is used. But at the center of that is the weakness in the management of our public system, including corruption itself. So these are the main internal reasons. Externally, after most of the poor countries, including Zambia, received debt relief, there was pressure from international creditors to lend to those countries that had their debts reduced, and Zambia was not an exception. So you saw a rush of the Chinese coming to Zambia, sweet-talking us to borrow, the IMF, the World Bank, and the private lenders from the international market coming to convince us that we needed to borrow all the time.
And out of the excitement, we fell into the trap and started borrowing more.
Borrowing without plans, borrowing without paying attention to how we're utilizing these resources, borrowing in an atmosphere where our management systems had not been strengthened. Some of these lessons could have been picked from the first round of the debt crisis, where after our debts were cancelled, we made clear suggestions to government to say, in order to avoid this problem in future, please strengthen the management of public resources. But unfortunately, our leaders did not heed to our advice. And today we found ourselves into this problem. So it's both a domestic and an international problem.
Okay, now Doctor, I'm tempted to find out from you, how does a highly indebted country like Zambia get affected? We know that we are a poor nation and we have all these diseases that are roaming around. There's tuberculosis, we have HIV and AIDS, of course the new pandemic, the COVID-19. So how can that be clustered as a consequence in relation to date?
Very clearly, you see, like I mentioned, you are a poor country. A poor country immediately tells you your capacity to generate your own resources is not adequate. Your capacities or opportunities to even generate those resources and set aside savings, not there. So when you begin to borrow under those two conditions with very weak financial basis, it means that you're borrowing, throwing yourself into indebtedness without a clear idea or without clear capacities on how to resolve that. So what happens? What happens is that when it comes to addressing your debt repayment obligations, you begin to get the very money that you're supposed to use for poverty reduction purposes, to put medicines in the clinics, to put desks in schools. That is the money we are hoping to pay for debt, because it is more dangerous to miss our debt obligations. So you find that for a government such as ours, they're really in a tight corner where they have to sacrifice or even almost strangling their own development prospects in order to meet debt obligations. In effect, it means mostly the poor, vulnerable people continue going to hospitals without adequate drugs. It will mean majority of the Zambians will be sending their children to schools that have no proper equipment. So debt can be directly connected to the social and economic living conditions of the people. And in Zambia, we're already seeing it in the high cost of living, in the lack of adequate social services, in the lack of our opportunities to create sustainable and gainful jobs, because all the money is being mopped to service debts. So debt, poverty, social injustices and inequality, there's a clear, strong connection.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc, for that wonderful explanation. Well, viewers, we're on the Jctr corner, and today we are discussing concerns in regards to Zambia's public debt. Now, Doc, I want to find out from you. We know that domestic debt, as at the end of 2019, stood at 26.2 billion in our nation. What are some of the implications of this particular domestic as well as international debt on the economy of Zambia?
Definitely. You see, and this is where our situation is very dire and desperate, that for the first time we can see the whole country engulfed in high levels of domestic and international debt. So what does it mean to have very huge debt domestically? Number one, it means, for instance, when you hear of domestic debt, it means that our government owes various economic and financial actors money that they need to pay them back. For instance, you've heard your brothers and sisters running around saying, I am a small-scale entrepreneur, I supply goods and services to government. Then government fails to pay me for those services. Yes. It means businesses are being run down or becoming bankrupt. These businesses that bring together a lot of Zambians to access income-generating activities and economic activities. If they do not thrive, then you see a lot more people thrown into unemployment and joblessness. So, and given that majority of the people of Zambians are in the informal sector, what does it mean when government owes its own economic and financial actors a lot of money? It means those economic and financial domestic actors become inactive. That's how come when you walk around, just even using Lusaka and several other cities, people are roaming around streets looking for jobs, looking for economic activities, because we have failed to ensure that our small-scale businesses, middle-income businesses, including national, domestically owned businesses, continuously invest and grow, thus employ more people, thus make more profits, thus make more savings. So the failure, the presence of huge domestic debt directly means the failure of the domestic economy. And when we talk about the domestic economy, we're not talking about the buildings that you see. We're talking about your life, your economic and financial life. It means you see a lot more people sitting at home calling themselves jobless. So there's a close connection between high domestic debt, poor domestic productivity, problems such as high unemployment levels, low income status. A lot of people are poor, just a few Zambians are enjoying in terms of income. And because of that, you begin to see these socio-economic inequalities. And today, Zambia is one of the highest unequal societies in the world. It all stems to our financial situation domestically and internationally.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. Before we go for a break, and probably you'll continue after the break, the question that comes to my mind is there anything wrong with the economy of our nation? Or if at all there's nothing wrong with the economy in our country? Doc, before you respond to that, let's just go for a short break. We'll continue on the other side as you continue explaining this particular question that I've just posed before you. Well, viewers, for now, let's go for a short break. Do join us shortly on the other side.
May we use these trying moments to rise to something that's important. Take life not for granted. Tell someone that you love them. If any of you have any COVID-19 symptoms, which are a fever of above 38 degrees Celsius, a cough, difficulty in breathing, shortness of breath, or chest pains, please do not hesitate to call 909 or 0974 49 35 53, and medical assistance will come your way. We hope for the better and leave everything in the hands of God. Together, we can combat COVID-19. Please stay at home for me. I stayed at work for you. Be that change.
Please do your best to stay at home. If you must leave your home, please remember to mask up. Keep social distancing of at least 1 meter and wash your hands often with soap and running water or any alcohol-based hand sanitizer.
Hello viewers, and welcome back to the Jctr Corner, a program brought to you by the Jctr for Theological Reflection in conjunction with Loyola TV. Today we're still looking at the issue of Zambia's public debt and the concerns that are there and how best we can address these concerns. And in the studio I am joined by Dr. Charity Msamba, who is helping me to discuss this important topic. Doctor, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
Doc, before the break I posed the question to say, do we see anything wrong with Zambia's economy in relation to debt, or is there nothing wrong with the economy altogether?
I think the way we should look at debt and the economy of Zambia should be more from a positive perspective.
Okay.
First and foremost, we are a well-resourced economy that if we put our resources to good use, we'll reduce on our pressure to always be borrowing. What has been forcing us to borrow has been largely our financial deficits, meaning that our economy has been failing to produce adequate resources to meet majority of our economic needs. So because of that gap, we go to borrow. And yet, the paradox is Zambia is one of the richest resource-endowed countries in this world, water, land,
minerals. Of course, yeah.
So I think the paradox is, how do we translate these resources in a manner that they generate adequate resources so as to reduce pressure on our policy and political elites from borrowing? At least at that level, that's where the problem is. So unless we invest in innovative economic approaches that will help us to translate these resources to good economic sustainable benefits, then we'll continue falling into debt. Otherwise, there are countries in this world, go to Botswana, largely it's a desert, but Botswana's debt is less than Zambia. They only depend on minerals as well. Go to Namibia, go to countries in North Africa. So what we're simply saying is that the problem is that it provides a big puzzle to us, well endowed, but heavily indebted. Yeah. So that's the problem.
Okay, I know there's the issue of Zambia bringing an external firm to come and look at the restructuring of our debt, how best we can sustain it. Would you say then that that was a good idea? Don't we have people in our nation who can look at that? Are we not overspending on our part, given the fact that we are owing people money, but again we want to pay someone to come and talk about or restructure the debt that we have as a nation?
I think clearly, based on your narration, this has been the concern and cry of the Zambian people out there, that the amount of money we are going to pay this auditing firm, the French auditing firm, $5 million, could be used to meet other development needs, or even to service some of the debts they've come to clean up.
Exactly.
So for us, we should take this as a big lesson, as a shame to ourselves, because we've spent the last 25 years claiming to be getting grants and aid to build the capacities of our bureaucrats, especially in the Ministry of Finance and related agencies, to manage financial business. So how come 50 years down the line, we are still incapable of calculating our own debts, and we rely on the expertise of outsiders to do so? For me, I think that is a risk, big risk we are taking. In terms of lessons, I think this is a big political lesson. We need to ask ourselves why we have failed to put in place in those offices capable Zambians who can do the work that the French team is doing. To audit technical and financial human resource in Zambia, definitely will find Zambians who can do this work.
Okay. Highlighting some of the concerns that you have as Dr. Charity Msamba, of course, a researcher and an academician, how would you put these concerns that we have in our nation over date?
Generally speaking, number one, what I think people out there are saying is that we do not have to create the impression that we need to borrow as much as we are always borrowing. What people want to see is that we utilize the resources that we have prudently, so that when we borrow for very needy areas, right reasons, right amount, and based on correct analysis on our ability to pay back. Sometimes, and most often, evidence is there, we've borrowed needlessly. We've borrowed without thinking on how we're going to pay back. We have even borrowed and wasted money openly.
As you're explaining that point, Doc, maybe if you can just combine, what would you say the way forward should be in our country where debt and borrowing is concerned?
I think number one, clearly we need a practical, realistic debt management strategy. Please, this should not be hijacked by people who don't understand what we're talking about. We need bureaucrats to take lead of the implementation of this debt management strategy in a manner that provides clear ways on how we can avoid another debt crisis. Secondly, we need to also put in place a proper economic recovery program. Again, let's not go back to the templates of IMF and World Bank. Let's look at our own domestic economic development prospects and then present such a plan even to our external funders. But we should take lead and responsibility of these two areas. Thirdly, we need a strong political stance on prudent use of public resources. To keep this continued behavior of ignoring the problem of public mismanagement of public resources, I think is to our own peril. And partly we are falling into debt because we've wasted, stolen, misappropriated our own resources. So we need to have a very strong leadership strategic direction on how we can fight against corruption, wastage of resources, and ensure that whatever little we have, we put to good use. Thirdly, we need to broaden our sources of economic prospects, especially in terms of generating incomes and ensuring that these incomes are huge enough to put savings aside. Finally, in my view, debt is not a financial problem.
Okay.
Indebtedness and repeated indebtedness means we have a problem with development management. And we are not saying just the political actors are to blame. I think there are various stakeholders who can come together using this current problem. Let's unite as a country and clearly understand and agree on what each one of us needs to do in order to ensure that we correct this problem urgently and leave in place a Zambia which gives signals of a good future, especially to the young generation that we are seeing today. A child born today is already indebted for the next 10 years. Is that the Zambia you want to see?
Not at all. Okay, this is where we have to come to the end of the program. Doc, I would like to say thank you so much for coming to the program. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for bringing to light some of the concerns that we have that we had on the program. To our viewers out there, I would like to say thank you so much for having stayed tuned with us. This has been the Jctr Corner with me, Annette Mlenga. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.